Hey, good morning, everyone.
Yeah, hey RD. So I wanted to start by welcoming all of our friends. I think the friendships are particularly important to this first on the offense session, which will be the fourth Thursday of every month as a and it's slightly influenced. I don't know if any of you are followers of the of Mark Maron's WTF podcast, which is sort of an attempt to focus on creativity and thoughtfulness and people who are doing unusual things and to help keep a focus on what's important. I highly recommend that podcast these days. This one won't be quite as broad, and it won't interview people like Michelle Obama and that sort of thing. But it will, I think, help all of us pull in the focus on what we do best. Certainly, at this point, many of us are involved in trying to fix our events, so that's taking a lot of attention. Many of our good friends, are struggling with issues of personal and energy and even good health. So I think this is dedicated to wellness and focus and being good business people. And I think many of us are concerned about, just general market fears, the courage it takes to confront a higher risk profile every time we make a publishing decision. That can be very debilitating. So the reason for this session is to sort of counter those things that are demanding so much of our attention and keep an eye on sort of amazing stories of success and I think the importance of our own creativity, our own ability to take risks, and even in difficult markets. And of course, the fact that we're all super cool, nice people who deserve to succeed. And a lot of that's, and part of the reason I wanted to do this first session with RD is around kind of a core concept that we all live with, which is, we are specialized publishers. We're all about experts creating content for experts. And RD has just done an extraordinary job of repeating that model, not for the first time in his career, but perhaps for the quickest time in his career, with a launch that was literally measured in several months. So with that, I'd like to welcome RD. It's always good to talk to you and always energizing to talk to you, and particularly this time. And could we start this out by just describing you just were part of pulling together a team of essential players that did a launch in a very short period. Could you describe, how you got the team together so quickly and what happened to get to this launch that you just did with the Virtual Events Institute?
Well, welcome everybody. Nice to share ideas. So I think this is a lemonade out of lemons moment, and lots of opportunity with not to sit back and have COVID, make things worse, but to use it as an example to really find opportunities. When COVID hit, I thought three things: virtualization of everything, work from home, and the talent management disruption that's happened in America that's never been like this before. So just a little background. First of all, this river behind me is the Piscataqua. It's the third fastest pivoting body of water in the world. The ocean comes in and the river goes out and it turns on a hinge. And I think that's perfect for right now because it's all about pivoting and finding opportunity in the chaos. The way this kind of came about, so back in 2010, 30 years been building professional communities, started with the Coopers, got inspired by the Coopers at Kennedy. And perfect example of building communities was the pivot from the accounts payable newsletters at IOMA, which David used to lead, to the Institute of Finance and Management, which is today the certification program for accounts payable, accounts receivable, procure to pay, order to cash, and all these other areas. Giant events, usually live, but lots of virtual, membership community, what have you. So a model everyone here is pretty familiar with. I just finished doing it up in healthcare benefits. So that's, kind of the areas that I've been working in. COVID hits. Back in 2010, I was CEO of the Trade Show News Network, which reports on the trade show industry. And I was highly involved in the first phase, version 1 of virtual events, which frankly sucked. There were a lot of virtual event platforms that came out that were horrible. Everybody thought it was going to be like Second Life, and we were going to have an avatar, and we were going to bounce around and talk to exhibitors. And that didn't work for many people, but a lot of money got poured into it. And I was reporting on it. We did a first research study on virtual events at that time. And I ended up getting on the board of directors for OnStream Media, who invented webcasting. They invented webcasting because back when the internet was formed, investor relation officers needed to be able to display earnings all at one time and all completely confidentially. And that's why webcasting got created. So I got on the board of directors as a virtual events sort of person of interest and followed it all the way through. And as I mentioned to you, David, I kind of felt like Noah at times, that, building an ark, and it was bright and sunny out and everybody was laughing, and, they didn't want to talk about virtual events at all. Anyway, so I've just been following that all along. COVID hits and my phone starts, going crazy. A lot of people are trying to learn how to quickly pivot to virtual events and everything. And I got involved in a lot of groups like this and with CISO and other things. And we're just talking and sharing what we know, and everybody was sharing, and it was great. And I got put on a webinar about virtualization, and they wanted to talk about monetization. And groups like Informa and Google and other groups were on there. I really didn't deserve to be on there. And anyway, there were 15,000 people that listened in on that. And the guy who had started that, who had founded Ingo, the social amplification software, a real serial entrepreneur, said to me, you've done these national certification programs over and over. How could we kind of capture this real need for education? And I said, yeah, totally agree. This got it screaming, the need for sort of capturing it and creating a start and finish line. Because I always think, why do you run in a race? Why do you run a 5K? Why do you pay to go run in a 5K when you could just run in circles in your backyard and not pay anything? It's because it's got structure, it's got recognition, it's got a start and an end, and a lot like the certification programs that are built, but I've never been involved in a global launch of one. So he had worked with the former head of attendee acquisition at Essential, Money 2020 and Cannes Lions, Sophie, and all these event companies are just letting their talent go. It's terrible. It's awful. I don't know how they think they're just going to turn it back on and everybody's still going to be there. But talent is just out the exit. So she jumped on board on this. And then a guy named Simon Burton as well, who has really been known around the globe for building fantastic awards programs. So I came in as an outside director and minority and investor by being a founder, and it launched about 4 weeks ago now. And when I say launch, I think that's part of the point. It went from idea to launch extremely quickly. But we can talk about sort of that.
But the webinar that you were on that sort of germinated, that was in March or April, wasn't it?
Yeah, late April.
Late April. So we're talking about, so the element, and I should say you launched, but you didn't just launch in the US. I mean, your initial sales are in the, Australia, Canada, the UK, the Arab-speaking world. You've got people coming from all over.
Yeah.
And was that because you, Sophie, the people that came together? You just had it sounds like you have a core team of sort of 6 or 7 people that made this happen in a period of two months essentially. Can you
Yeah.
talk just a little bit about that? Who did what? And also you had this idea. Was there any time for market research, or did you just go completely on entrepreneurial hunch here
Mm.
to get this up?
I think the best analogy is, when my daughters were little, we went to Yellowstone and got to see the guys. The guys are Old Faithful, and it takes three ingredients. I remember the ranger saying to make that happen: water, heat, um, and plumbing. Plumbing. You had to have water, heat, and plumbing were the three things that have to come together at the exact same time for that explosion to keep happening consistently.
Yeah.
So it's really amazing how this came together, but I've really learned about launches from this. So I have to give it, Sophie, had been let go. So she had the ability to really focus and on sweat, pull this all together. Yeah. She was able to pull together, and a marketing person had also been let go from Essential, and she had a beautiful network globally of people that had time on their hands and really also were curious about what was happening with virtual events.
Yeah.
So I do think there was some magic between, two of the co-founders being in the US, myself and Michael, he's in DC, and then two of the other co-founders being in the UK. I know, we kind of joke that, America is a little bit isolated. We got, the, World Series and they don't really play anyone else except a few Canadian teams, so we sometimes have our hands in. But the, UK folks, they're really on China and the rest of the world's growth and everything. So there was definitely an influence there. But we all kind of brought something different to the table, and it just exploded.
But it sounds like the common theme here is you were able to capitalize on all this talent that's suddenly been thrown on the street, and just pulling those together happened almost instantaneously.
Yeah.
Were you able to agree quickly? Because the core element of what you're doing with the Virtual Events Institute is obviously a certification program, but how were you able to agree so quickly on the revenue streams around that? Or was it partially because of your expertise and having done this before, so you're able to say, here are the elements? Could you, talk about your role there?
I think that was my biggest contribution. And I think for everybody on the call here, when you think about your communities, like, a lot of people think, like, who am I to do a certification program? I always loved that question, who are you to, launch in this industry? We just did a healthcare benefits once. Well, you know what? We found out the people that buy healthcare get all their education from the exact same establishments that make more money when the healthcare services go down and the costs go up, the insurance companies. That's where they're getting their education. So we are the people that deliver the right product at the right time in the right modem. So same thing here. And I think, that was my influence in the beginning. I'm like, the principle here is kind of like what Cons Lions has, right? Or even IOFM in a much, much, much smaller way, is this idea that there's a core learning ingredient to the community. There is a community forming around that. Then there is a membership with tools, resources, and access to the other community that people will eventually pay to belong to. There's an awards program that highlights best practices, but in virtual events, that's what everybody wants to know right now. What tools should I use? And can you give me an example of how it's used in a best practice? And so I think certification, though, is like something you can launch. I remember you mentioned Thompson. I used to work for the other Thompson, the Little Thompson, legislative Thompson out of DC for Richard Thompson. And we had a rule. We wouldn't launch the product until we had 200 orders. And we would do direct mail. And once 200 orders hit, we had to run like hell and then build the product. And I was reminded of that here. Is like, you actually, because there's so much demand, you can announce the product, have 1 or 2 modules ready, in the can, and then rapidly deploy them as it starts to be successful. Have your trainers lined up and all that. And Sophie was able to bring so much of that to the table.
Richard Thompson, I think maybe was a little more sophisticated at that than I've been. I usually describe that as having hamsters running around behind the website, just trying to keep the appearance that there's actually a there sometimes. But as I recall in conversations with you, when you conceived of this, there's a dozen or slightly more modules around the training thing, and you launched 30 days ago, plus or minus now,
Yep.
with two of those ready. So can you, who's doing the development of the remaining one, and what's, and it sounds like that hasn't been a problem. It's worked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's an uncomfortable situation. We actually launched with none of them ready. And then we had a plan, and we said, these are, because I think that's important. You've got to outline the curriculum. You got to show them the pathway. What's the 5K race I'm signing up for? Oh, it goes along the ocean and it finishes up with a beer, right? You got to give them the path.
Yeah.
We had that. I mean, that was fairly easy to pull together. And if you think about your communities on everyone on the call, it's like, think about the curriculum that might develop the online learning that people would want. And, that's a pretty PDF, pretty easy to pull together, and then start to backfill who could be the trainer in that. Because if you can do it right, and it really fell into place on this, trainers are motivated to do those modules because they want to be recognized for that particular area of expertise. And the beautiful thing is, once you sort of start that engine, it just keeps going. It's like fusion, because you need to know about speaker prep and content development and marketing best practices, of course, and all these other things that would, monetization, all these things that would be obvious. But I was just on a discussion yesterday with a woman who had just gone through education on event design. She spent a lot of money and went on an education program for event design, live event design, and became an MC, and really figured she found her pathway. She was MCing lots of professional association events and things like that. And COVID hit and it all went out the window. She said, you know what? So she said for 2 weeks, she sort of sat on the couch and ate potato chips and was depressed. And then she said, you know what? I'm going to be a virtual MC. And now she's booked all the way through the end of the year, and she's fantastic. So that made me think, there's got to be a module on the selection of a virtual MC and the things that are different about MCing a live event versus a physical event. And this could just keep going for years, because it's short-term virtual, medium-term hybrid, and long-term, what we've been all talking about on this, this group here, community, right? That's where it's going, and you can take them along that path.
Yeah, so take that example. So what you're talking about is sort of rolling product development and open-ended. You've got the 5K mapped out, but if you want to do a 6th and 7th and 8th and 9th K, that's coming in front of you. So just take the example of choosing a virtual meeting thing. You've got a very motivated expert who could potentially help you create that module, and then you've got several revenue streams where you can build out that body of content. You've already got the old, replicate model mapped out in front of you. Have you, as that's occurring, are you hiring into those, or are you, right now it sounds like you're able to do it with that initial core team, so your costs don't get out of line with your revenues? Is that true, or how's that happening?
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, like, this body of water, you got to just be ready to spin on a dime. And the people that were caught off guard on this are the big companies, right? So they sat around with their head in the sand for a while and said, if live events are super important. Nobody's doubting that. Nobody is doubting that. We all miss them. And then live events are going to come back. And look, the southern states, they're, and then suddenly, oh, maybe it won't be this summer. Maybe it won't be Easter, glorious Easter. Maybe it won't be this summer. Maybe it won't be this fall. Okay, well, maybe we can't keep a payroll of 1,000 employees on, right? So for me, my lesson is like, every company that I build in the future is going to be under a model that if there is no revenue, there is almost no cost. Somebody once said to me, the key to life is keeping your overhead low. And I think he was really, really right. And so, but when there is revenue, everybody's making a lot of money, right? And I think that applies here. But that revenue model too is like, okay, you can launch with a certification or an online education program. Then what you can do is start to convert them into a membership because you're showing them tools, you're collecting because you're the community, all these tools and resources. And then they got to become a member. And then when renewal for the certification comes around, you're controlling it. You're controlling the CEUs. And you can throw membership, you can throw recertification into the membership. And then you've got this annual recurring revenue stream, which the private equity firms really like when it comes time to sell it later.
Yeah.
I think that's how that can move.
So RD, the reason I wanted to talk to you today and do this is because your energy is infectious, and you're also reminding me and hopefully everyone else of some really fundamental basics that have been true and are still, or perhaps are even more true now than they have been. So it's very comforting to hear you, cite Richard Thompson from back in the day on a model that's working now. So I think I hope everyone else on this call is as inspired by your energy as I am. So thank you for that. And what I'd like to do is sort of kick it off and open it up by just saying you've done this before and you're building on your expertise, which reminder to all of us, we are experts. So let's do that. Just a quick answer on this time in this very short, change of the direction of the river that you've mentioned several times. What have you learned in the last 30 days that's different? What's surprised you? And then let's open it up for questions, and with huge thanks for your good spirit, RD. We all need that. So what surprised you?
Yeah, I think I've learned, 6 months ago, I think, it was all, bow down to the big event companies, because, right, they were the ones that figured it out. That was the association that survived. They were the ones that monetized. And, the poor magazine companies and, even SIPA, the specialized information companies got sort of sucked up into the software industry, right? But
Yep.
Guess who has all the jewels?
Yeah.
Now the event companies are like, wait a minute, we were just selling cement on a floor. We were a real estate company. But this group has all the jewels. So what's important? What's the gravity between buyer and seller? How do you monetize it? And how do you get to a minimally viable product the software industry always uses very quickly, and serve the customer really quickly and let the customer feel part of that launch?
Yeah. Wow. Let the customer feel like they're part of the launch. So capitalizing on the expertise that some other people have cast off, and then involving the expertise of the customers too. There's a lot of power there. So Stephanie, open it up if you want. And we got a whole bunch of questions on chat, but I think we'll maybe unmute. And if people want to chime in, I see maybe Victoria, do you want to chime up? I see your question first, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, what I think I can do, if there's if I see a question in the chat, then we can, that person, you can either post in chat and I will read your question out, or if you want to just unmute yourself, then you can ask your question out loud, whichever is more comfortable for you guys, that will work.
Victoria, go ahead. I see your hand.
Yeah, no, RD, I love the talent. We did the same with recognizing the sort of talent dump in 2008, and we picked up some great people during that period in DC, and actually it transformed our business. We had this incredible management team, and I managed to do, a lot off the back of that. So, good for you. That's really fantastic. I may have missed this because I had to restart. I'm sorry, I had a UK related Zoom issue. But what's the membership and pricing model that you're following for this? It's just interesting. Was it individual? Tell me a little bit about that.
So for my past 3 sort of communities that I've been involved in, it's been about $1,000 price point for getting certified.
Yeah.
Usually with about 10 modules. But again, it becomes an online learning library forever. So there's renewability to it. one other thing that I thought was really interesting in this launch is, the idea of scarcity, I think is really powerful in marketing. And so they created 100 early seats that were, I think they were for $6.90. And, they got snapped up quickly. We're all marketers here. I'm sure if we had said, can you open another 100 seats? Somebody might have done it, right? But, I think that idea of scarcity is there, but $1,000 price point for an annual access to the certification program. You don't really need to get specific with people early on the renewability of it, because you're kind of moving as it goes. I think the renewable part of it is going to be around that price, unless they're a member, which, you could do it at a very low price. Membership, I think, will probably be like IOFM, for example. As I recall, it was like about $900 to get certified. It was about $900 for membership, and it was a little over $1,000 to go to the events. And all three of those, fed each other.
Right. And are you selling that through pure marketing, or do you have a sales effort behind that as well?
Yeah. Again, it started as pure marketing, outbound emails. And there was this initial list that Michael from Ingo had, because there was this interest in virtual events. So they went up immediately to 15,000 people. Here's the coolest thing about virtualization. Like, we think of it as one way for the event industry. Event industry people are desperate. They need it. But associations, nonprofits, my wife's a financial director for Habitat for Humanity, and I was watching her the other night at 7 o'clock doing the board meeting. And I'm like, do you think you'll ever go back to doing a board meeting? I mean, it's 50 miles away. She has to travel. She's like, maybe not. We're getting it all done. And think about corporations, their sales meetings, the pharma meetings, like all the things, like virtualization affects everything. So I think that's kind of the interesting thing, as well as the diversity of the market.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's a direct marketing play to begin, and may go to a sales model.
Oh, right. I went off track there. So Sophie, again, had a great connection to a woman who had amazing connections at sort of Tencent and Alibaba and all these other great things. She speaks fluent Mandarin as well. And she had great connections in the event industry from her experience. So she came on as a salesperson, and I understand she's doing really well. So it quickly, I think it was 3 weeks from launch, that they brought on a salesperson.
Great. Other questions?
Hi, it's Elizabeth. This is fantastic. I actually think I've written down and underlined your quote, let the customer feel like they're part of the launch process. That's excellent. I see on the line, I know we've got a lot of folks from my company and a number of folks who are involved with different types of communities and associations. What are some of the things you did around launch to start engaging people, either formally or informally, in the community that you were building?
Great question. So the four of us all had contacts. Like, I knew Dave, I knew the co-founder of LinkedIn, I knew Wayne Cooper, I knew Deb McGrath, who started HR.com. So I said, look, I'll talk to people that trust me, and I think that they'd have interest in maybe being involved as an advisor, because it's great positioning for other things. And so there was enough trust there. They say, can I put you on the advisory board, which helps us create instant credibility. And Sophie was able to do that, and Simon was able to do that, and Mike was able to do that. And that advisory board for Virtual Events Institute is unbelievable. David Adler, from BizBash, I knew from Tarsus. And so that was really, really important. The other thing is partnerships. And Wayne Cooper just reminded me of this as well. He's got chief executive, and everybody said nobody's making money on virtual events from the attendee side, and that's bullshit. Like, they definitely are. He recently did an event where they gave a code out to the speakers that were involved in the event, and he did really well because of that, because their networks all then came in, and he paid a referral fee. And it's just such a great reminder. So the way that this thing is going to grow is I used to run TSNN, and I helped hire the marketer there, and I knew the person running it now, and BizBash and some of these groups that have huge reaches. You say to them, look, this would be great to bring on in your store. And if you sell it, we'll give you X from every one that comes through. And then you start to do that in every country, and you start to do that with every major media player, and everybody feels part of it. And they're more importantly, getting rewarded from it. I think that's really critical.
Yeah. Have you, just on that, to follow up on Elizabeth's question, and obviously there's a range in those partnership deals, but can you give a model of a typical deal because that issue of going to market so quickly and essentially being ahead of your forecast an hour after you launched, which happened to you, sales were coming in right away. What sort of model did you use with the distribution partners?
Yep. So the right partner, that has the right community, a partnership's a partnership. I would say half, right? So here's the beautiful thing. You give them half of the, of the first sale, and then you get the conversion and the renewals for the rest of your life. So that's really attractive for the big ones. Like, look, very transparent. You sell anything, we track it, and you got to track it, and you got to show them reporting, and we'll give you half back. But then, you got players that have smaller channels or want to get involved anyway. 25, I think you can probably even, play in that range. But on a product like this, as everyone on this call knows, if you build it once and you sell it 1,000 times.
Yeah, gorgeous. I see a question from Suzanne, but if anyone else, Suzanne, do you want to jump on?
Sorry, I've been having a little Wi-Fi challenges this morning. I'm interested in your geographic reach and where you're seeing those pockets of need, and I'm assuming corresponding concentrations in your membership.
Yeah, well, I'm a big fan of America. It's a huge country of 50 countries. We have 1.5 million associations and nonprofits in America alone, millions of corporations that all have marketing departments. And we got a tiny event industry, right? It's like, so America alone is huge, but, and I don't pretend to be an expert globally, as some of my colleagues are, but I understand the reach of the Chinese market. And, our salesperson has reach into like a Tencent or an Alibaba that could just change the game overnight. And they got a lot of the global events industry headed out of the UK, so you can do site license deals into them because they frankly need this education for their entire staff. So you've got the big public players, the privatized players, the private equity players. But I think what's key there are people on the ground in that country that know that market and have those trusted relationships. So, my daughter lives in Australia, and I want to find a way to spend a couple months there in the winter because I'm never going to get her back because she met a good looking boy that I didn't want to like and I really like, and they got a dog, and I'm never getting her back. But when I've been there before, I've gotten to know a couple media companies just because I'm interested in networking there. And over that trust, I was able to, send an email and say, hey, this is something that's going. Would you be interested in being a on the ground sales channel partner?
Not on video or audio.
And, there are only 29 million people, but it's a great market. So I think on the ground thing, partnerships are the way to go.
So right now you've got sort of sounds like you're getting orders from all different markets. So is it primarily US based as a percentage so far, or are you finding because of the Chinese connection and the Mandarin speaking sales staff that,
I think it's definitely US and UK to start. I think the thing I'm so interested in the Chinese, because I understand that they just consume education, things like this, right? And so I don't know where that will go, but there is global, that social media is just so beautiful now because it spreads so quickly. So there's global appeal quickly, but the start out has been US and UK.
Yeah. Are you? I see Stephanie Eidelman just asked about using your advisory board. Do you have plans to capitalize on that too? That's obviously another resource you pulled together very quickly due to your connections. So. Yeah.
And that's part of the uncomfortableness of these rapid launches, right? Like you have to have some trust in place. Like David, I don't know if you would, if you didn't know me, you'd be like, I don't know if I want to be associated with it, but you knew me enough to say, look, let us launch. And I think this is going to be really good. And we're going to come back to you with a set of benefits for advisors. and that should include, you know, free education, you know, and networking with the other advisors, and even, you know, sort of potentially, I think it's always great when you can send a reward to somebody for bringing in attention to it. So we're developing those lists of benefits for advisors, for partners, and I think that's key to follow through with, so that everybody feels the benefit of it, or it'll quickly you know, go away if we don't.
Yeah, and I'll follow. It's sort of related, but it's a weird thing to talk about. I'm about to go to Victoria's question here again too, but you're 30 days into launch. You've identified a market that became substantial 5.5 months ago. You know, it's always been there, but now suddenly it's a body of knowledge, and it's a new class of professional and all those sort of things. So Victoria, that's a great question. Victoria's asked, like, you gotta protect your turf already. You're 30 days in. Any thoughts about that? And maybe also what's for the next 30 days, what are your priorities now that you're up off the end of the runway and the river's changed direction?
Yeah, no, the turf thing is real. You know, so PCMA and MPI do have online training courses that cover virtual.
Yep.
You know, I mean, what you need to do is point out the uniquenesses of it, right? So they're covering virtual from the perspective of the event producer, not from the NBA. What's the NBA that's interesting? What is gaming doing that's interesting? A woman that used to work for me at Diversified, her son is a DJ, and he likes Minecraft, and they were celebrating one of their friends' birthday party as an event inside of Minecraft, and they raised $50,000 for a charity during that birthday party. That's a virtual event. That is a commercialization of a virtual event, and that's really, really innovative. And I guarantee you're not going to bring those kind of things in from the conventions industry or from, you know, people who buy food and beverage at a hotel. Like so you got to be unique. So bringing these things from all around. Religion, like I think I said to David, like I want to talk to my priest about going to the Pope and seeing if we can do virtual confession. And the reason for that is because they're going to get a lot more people to try it, because they're going to take the barriers out, and then they're going to have a lot more people to convert later.
Yeah.
I'm highly convinced that when we go back to live events, we're going to have a hybrid model next to it forever now. So I think it's staying ahead of those, because these guys are much well funded. You know, all these guys could easily develop something like this, but we got early traction, and I think we're going to be okay. But we're also fundraising. So there are investors that have shown interest in this, and so, you know, you need money to go faster, right?
Yeah. Well, I think I can say probably without fear of contradiction that you are the only group of SME or person in SME Connect who could introduce all the rest of us to the idea that we need to consider Minecraft and the Pope as possible market output. Like, you know, maybe not. There may be somebody else in here who's working closely with the Pope, but in which case, let us know. But I thank you for that. And there are a bunch of other questions, but we said we'd do this in 40 minutes. So I want to say that RD's on the Slack channel. We're all on the Slack channel. So let's move the rest of the questions out of the channel and stay online with this. With thanks to you, RD, an extraordinary first effort to just put some entrepreneurial juice into everyone's day and get us all thinking creatively. Ed?
Just a quick question, logistics question, but will this be on the events Slack channel that will continue this? Just so we're looking all looking in the same place.
Well, you can obviously on the Slack channel, you can reach out to RD individually, but yeah, let's use the events channel. I think that's a good place for this. If you have further questions and debate, that's great. And the last thing I'll say is, any of you on the call have stories of unusual markets, I'm totally infatuated with the Pope at this point, or different go-to-market strategies or other successes, and want to be part of this in the future, obviously reach out to me. My plan at this point next month, the fourth Thursday of September, I really want to do an interview with Cindy Carter, who many of you know, but she literally, in the midst of COVID, has gone through an event where she took maybe $10 million of publishing assets on a 2-year curve. And now the valuations she's getting are in the 300 million range. So our friend Cindy has ridden this staggering business transaction, event. So my plan is to interview Cindy about her story next month, but we can bring in somebody else or whatever. So I'd like to say thanks for all of you. RD, particularly, thank you to you for your good energy and humor and spirit. Really, really enjoyable. And to all the rest of you, thanks for participating in this first on the offense. Any suggestions about how to make it better? We'll move ahead. So signing off from number one. Lots of love to everyone. Bye-bye.